Hey guys, VaulSC here. Hope that you're doing well. Happy New Year. We're in 2025 now, and just played the very first game of Conquest, Last Argument of Kings for the new year. It's 100 Kingdoms against Dweghom. This turned out to be an absolute barn burner. It was just such a banger of a match. Went really close all the way to turn 10, just the way you want it. So can't wait to bring this one to you. Playing against local buddy Andy, who is just sort of starting Dweghom. He has put together his new Ironclad Drake and some Fireforged, etc. A couple of characters painted up, so the majority of the models will be provided by me and painted by me, but he's starting to put together some of his own stuff, and it will be our second game actually. He's played a few times now and really just getting the hang of things. So let's get into it, because this is a really fun one. Just going to have a look at the list now. I am playing the exact same army list that I did in my last bat rep, for the main reason that all the models were already packed up and ready to go, so I didn't even have to take miniatures out of the case and put new ones in. I could just show up to the game. But honestly, this is just a list that I really enjoy, because the big fat unit of Crimson Tower Knights looks cool on the table. It's slightly more efficient with the Olefant's Roar not having to be unlocked by long lineage. And Eccentric fighting style is pretty nice on a character that has Terrifying 1 and 8 attacks. Obviously, well, it gets 8 attacks from Olefant's Roar, but when you're Clash 4 and Terrifying 1, it's quite a cool one to put on your Priory Commander. Very expensive, and I think for more serious lists, I would spread the points out a little bit, but it's just very fun to play the Crimson Towers that way. And obviously using as many Steel Legion as I can here. Sorry, Gilded Legion is what I'm trying to say. I'm seriously considering buying that additional box so I can have the big massive turtle unit of like 8 to 9 stands, because then you really make even more use of Relentless Drill for the triple support, and obviously you get more mileage out of Armor of Dominion and better resolve for your character overall. So thinking about doing that later in the year, depending on obviously what happens with the new rules update, which is coming later this month. Chapter Mage obviously is always a lock with the School of Fire. There is no other viable school at the moment. They've kind of wrecked the other ones. Well, actually, I tell a lie. School of Water is actually pretty good if you really build around it, but the other two, not so much. Alright, my opponent. Steelshaper is the Warlord here, a very solid Warlord choice. I still think that the Sorcerer is also very good, and there are people actually playing the whole Reg, believe it or not, because of his ability to make lights scoring, which is quite important in the current competitive meta. But the Steelshaper, still very, very good for that lovely, lovely healing that you get when you spend the Elemental Potency cheating tokens, as I like to call them. So, keeping things minimal with no extra like gear there. Ardent Kerawegh got Flaming Oratory, which is just an amazing thing, really, whether he's going in the Berserkers or the Initiates. Memory Breath, it has been nerfed a bit, but still providing +3 Aura of Death no matter what, so that could be useful in a long haul. Hold Reg, unlocking the Ironclad Drake. The Warriors, they're a little bit squishy, so you probably will lose your Reg, but other than putting him in the Initiates, it's kind of a hard thing to get done when you don't have access to all the models that you would normally like to use. And obviously the Tempered Sorcerer on the Hellbringer, it's a staple Dweghom choice. For the scenario, we're going with Maelstrom. This is one where there are 3 different zones, 2 big ones on the side, a small one in the middle. At the start of the game and the end of the game, the middle one is worth more points, but during the midsection of the game, the side zones are worth more points, so you have to bear that in mind. But there are no points to be scored from killing things, so a nice, standard, easy to understand mission. If you're a new player, this is a great mission to start out with, because it's pretty straightforward about how that goes. Alrighty, so you can sort of see the opening, actually, so have I picked up the right game here? Let's just skip to the one that we're actually wanting to do here. So 2025 Conquest games, let's go up a folder. We're in 2025 now, not 2024, so it's actually this one where we're wanting to report on. So as you can see, my opponent, he's got his beautiful Ironclad Drake in the distance there, which we'll get some close-up photos of in a second, and the rest of the army being stuff that's provided by me. But the just the comment there, you can see the Maelstrom mission. My opponent's having a read of it as we speak. Got the big zones to the side, one small one here. Now, there are 3 hills, 1, 2, 3, providing obviously a little bit elevation, size 2 hills. Then there are 3 forests, which of course have hindering and obscuring, etc., and 2 little impassable buildings there, and that is our terrain setup, nice and straightforward. Okay, so I've got 2 lights. I pick one of them to come on automatically. The other one rolls 4 or less successfully, so they're both arriving. Opponent goes first, bringing on his only light unit, which is the Flame Berserkers. The plan is to move them onto the middle objective, and then on turn 2 to use Rancor from the Kerawegh to make them scoring, allowing him to pick up an early lead on points, which is important. So with that in mind, we're moving up both units of crossbows. This unit to the left here will be able to shoot anything that touches that zone, so they're positioned in that way. Note that they both have Vanguard from the Imperial officer, providing Vanguard to 2 infantry units per turn. On to turn 2, we've got the Mage arriving and the Men-at-Arms and the Hunter Cadre, which have flank, and everything else in my army is heavy. So it's a very, very stacked to the top end kind of heavy list. My opponent has a lot of mediums, but he also fails a lot of rolls for bringing them on, so most of my opponent's army is still in reserve also. Righty, so he does bring in the Flame Berserkers just to touch that zone with 2 of his stands. I can then bring on my Mage, just marching on with the triple movement from Vanguard as we talked about. She will hopefully be in range to fire their fire dart at the enemy as well. Then we have the Initiates coming in behind the Flame Berserkers, again with that plan of putting Rancor on them to give them scoring to the command stand to allow them to pick up those early points. Just a bit of close-up on my opponent's Kerawegh regiment here. You can see that the little retinue that he's created for these guys are not Parabellum miniatures. These are from some other wargaming system, and I did ask him about it, but I can't remember the name of them. If you guys know, let me know in the comments if you want to, but they look appropriate, I feel. They look really cool, and I love that little bird's nest on the top of the smokestack of this little guy. At long distance visually, I thought maybe these were War Machine models, because they look like those mini Warjacks, but they are not. They're from some sort of system. Alright, I have my Hunter Cadre appearing on the right-hand flank here. These guys can Vanguard as well. They triple march to a full 18 inches, which will allow them to move shoot onto the zone in the next turn and start scoring some points. And quite importantly, these zones are going to be worth more as of turn 5. Alright, close up on the Kerawegh, casting Rancor as expected. Lovely paint job, of course. The turquoise and the orange is just... it pops out so well, and the accent of the purple color, really nice. Over here, the crossbow is shooting at the Flame Berserkers as expected, but not really getting too much damage done. For turn 3, though, what we're going to do is we're going to start with the crossbows, and they're going to, again, shoot the Flame Berserkers before they can move across to my side of the board. We're going to fireball them after that, and also shoot them with the Mage, who is in the Men-at-Arms regiment. The Men-at-Arms do not have guns, but if they aim shoot, the Mage can use her gun, and she's got Kiss Farewell, which is basically Volley 3, Burst 7, Barrage 7. So just by herself, she is like a ranged unit, doing more damage than most ranged units do. And then after that, we're going to wait for the Gilded Legion and Ashen Dawn to show up. We do not have our Steel Legion or Crimson Towers this turn. They're going to be showing up turn 4. So, initially, we've got the crossbows firing at the Flame Berserkers, doing a bit more damage to them. The Mage, as predicted, does fire at them and obviously cast the fireball as well. The Rag, coming in to my opponent's right flank. This is well away from what's happening in the battlefield to the top left, you can see there. So he'll be in position to just snag that little objective, so I'll have to deploy something opposite that. Men-at-Arms using their movement, and again, as we talked about, they're shooting to fire at the Flame Berserkers, who have been whittled down to just one stand, as you can see, which is going well. Opponent bringing in the massive Ironclad Drake, and what he's doing here is he's bringing them alongside the Initiates here, which is not a bad move. It means that he can sort of support them and make sure that his regiments aren't getting surrounded, and also this tower here, this impassable terrain, is going to act as a bit of a shield for the Drake getting flanked, so that is one way to go. It's a very fast monster though, so it could always divert its attention to this zone to the right-hand side if he wants to. A lovely close-up photograph of the Ironclad, just amazing. This guy's really good with the airbrush, as you can see, and more so the color choices, like the warm color that he's used there for the yellows and the orange just stands out because he's used the color wheel to pick some opposite cold colors. But everything just seems to complement very well. I'm going to take some sort of more glamour photos of this miniature tonight, and hopefully he'll post them on social media for the Colors of Conquest competition as well. So hopefully we can see that. But once I have a bit more time to, you know, get the camera settings right and the lighting, etc., this should look really, really good. Obviously, the lighting on, you know, in the middle of the hobby store is not the best, but still a very good photograph of it. Alright, we have the other unit of crossbows just moving into the forest here. They are all taking advantage of the branches and the trees to conceal themselves, but they are shooting long range at the Flame Berserkers, just reducing them to only a couple of wounds left. So over the right-hand side here, we've got the Hunter Cadre. They would love to be shooting at that Drake because they have Fiend Hunter. They can re-roll their misses, and the Drake apparently does not have Hardened, unless, of course, you've got the Steelshaper putting his spell, like Tempered Plate or whatever it's called, onto the Drake. So these guys would love to shoot the Drake, but he's a bit too far away at the moment, so they're contenting themselves just to put one stand onto that circle so that they can start scoring some points. Here we have the Kerawegh moving directly behind the Flame Berserkers, so they'll be able to continue scoring for this round, and then in the next round he'll be able to move in to replace them on the zone and hopefully hold that for a bit longer while, you know, the zone is going to be worth the 2-point bonus. Alright, time for the Gilded Legion to appear along with Vanguard. Vanguard very important for them because otherwise they'd be quite slow. They are marching up all the way behind the crossbows here and partially into the forest. And the thought is that we've got the Ironclad Drake up there, and there's going to be enough space, especially with double time, for this entire regiment to move past and engage the Drake that way, and eventually the Initiates as well. The thinking here is that if the Ironclad Drake charges me, the pikes will turn off half of his impact hits, and he'll lose Inspired, and the Drake will have to be in contact with the Imperial officer who has Armor of Dominion. So that's going to turn off Cleave. And if he's using Bastion, the Drake will end up doing very little damage against this large unit. And then when I attack back at him, obviously I've got Cleave 1, and I've got a massive attacks here with all of the support 3s. So this should be the right regiment to deal with that Drake. So I'm hoping to kind of set up that conflict, which is why I really wanted to activate this, or place this unit after the Drake has appeared. On the extreme left-hand side here, I've got the Ashen Dawn just sneaking through into the forest. Normally, this is not really a stealthy unit. You're not really sneaking through forests with them, but the reason why I'm doing it is because I'm expecting him to counter them with Fireforged and or the Hellbringer Sorcerer. Both of those things will be able to do very well against this unit because of all that armor piercing too, not just from the Fireforged and the Drake's guns, but from the Sorcerer itself with the Fireball. So I'm expecting to be this to be one of my lesser performing units this game, even though they are the Ashen Dawn. They're the mightiest unit in the game pretty much. Having said that, he's deployed his Rage and his Hold Warriors, which ironically are about the equivalent points of the Knights here, and the Hold Warriors just by themselves will get absolutely crushed by the Ashen Dawn. So hoping to basically kill them and then trade a bit of time against the Fireforged or whatever and possibly pick up some objective points in the meantime. So that's the thinking. So going into turn 4, the rest of the army shows up. Both of us have 100% of our cards. So what will happen initially is the Mercenary Crossbowmen will shoot at the shoot at the Flame Berserkers before they can attack me, hopefully. And then I'll just be stalling them out with character cards and hopefully activating the Gilded Legion and the Crimson Tower absolutely last, because I need to sort of see what he does before I commit those two regiments, to be honest. Alright, so I do win the roll, and the crossbows shoot at the Flame Berserkers, but without killing them, actually. We don't get a great number of hits there, so he does still have his Flame Berserkers, who have rallied in the previous turn, I might add. That allows him to march charge, which means that if I don't kill them now, then whenever I activate these guys next, they're going to get hit by a little bit of Aura of Death, which is kind of annoying. With that in mind, I do have this other unit of crossbows across the way, so the distant unit over there, which will be able to shoot into this combat here and actually clear out the last command stand, because they've only got 2 wounds left. The crossbows are able to shoot them down successfully there. Moving on, Steelforged showing up. They're going to the right side of the initiates, and this is a good move. They are going to be able to fit past this building. I'm not too sure if you guys can see it very clearly in the photo, but there's an impassable terrain house there. So he actually measured this out and found that there's enough distance between the initiates and the house to get the Steelforged through, and he also has enough time to sort of do a partial move to the left with his initiates if he needs to. We will find later in the game that he does actually reform them into a narrower column as well. The Steelforged being quite important here. They are going to be very resistant to my shooting, and they are going to absolutely trash crossbows and men-at-arms in close combat. So I'm going to have to bring in my knights and my Steel Legion to try and deal with these guys, but they will still be a very dangerous unit regardless. Speaking of Steel Legion, I have brought the Steel Legion opposite the Steelforged. It's steel against steel. Hopefully my steel does better because it's cleave 2. The problem is that if he gets to jump on me, his Clash 5 is going to rip through these guys pretty badly. If I get the jump on him, the cleave 2 will do a number against him as well. So I kind of want to position these guys in a way that even if I do lose the initiative there, I'll have something else that can charge, and I'm strongly considering bringing in my Crimson Towers to the center. It just depends on where he puts everything else, but the Steel Legion coming in here will take advantage of the fact that the Steel Forge will not have impact hits when they're leaving the forest with a charge. And if he doesn't bring them that far forward and the initiates are pretty aggressive, then the Great Swords should be able to attack the initiates, which is another good target for them. Alright, so he's bringing in his Hellbringer Sorcerer here, right behind the Hold Warriors, and this is not a bad play because, as you can see when I move the camera, the Knights of the Ashen Dawn are at the top right. So what you want to do is bring in the Hold Reg here and sort of take the zone and sort of screen for the dragon. These guys will come in and probably kill the Hold Warriors, but with the Armor Piercing 2 shooting and the Armor Piercing 2 Fireball, this Drake will eventually take care of the Ashen Dawn. Even if I get charged, even if he gets charged by 1 or 2 stands, he's got the Elemental Potency tokens, and he's got Evasion too, so he should be able to block a lot of that. And in the late game, unless I commit the Knights as well, he's going to easily be able to score this zone quite effectively. So not a bad place for him to be. If for some reason he survives with 1 or 2 stands of Hold Warriors and kills the Ashen Dawn, that would be brilliant for him, because then he can just march the dragon closer to the center and just start gunning me down, basically. So there's another side-on view, and you can sort of see the importance of that statement, really. If the Ashen Dawn, for some reason, are not successful against the Hold Warriors, because the Drake is just so fast, it's going to be able to march through there and just get these guys. And even in a situation where it's the only survivor and you lose the Hold Warriors, it can position itself there as a big square, and because it's size 3, it can technically see over the hill. Correct me if I'm mistaken, but that should be a possible play for the late game, so keep an eye on that. Alright, so the Mage and the Men-at-Arms just carefully repositioning a little bit, trying to get a few shots off on the initiates, but of course they're very well armored, so we're not expecting very much in terms of results there. And here he decides to make a bit of a turn with the dragon. So what's happened is that he's reformed the dragon, or at least wheeled a little bit, and moved it closer in this direction. The interesting thing about this is that the Drake is now going to be able to threaten this zone, and the Drake can easily beat these Hunter Cadre in close combat, but the problem for the Drake now is that he's going to get hit by these Fiend Hunters here. So these guys are all Armor Piercing 1, rerolls against monsters. And his center is actually kind of fine there, but it just remains to be seen what happens with this unit, right? So I was initially going to march through there with double time and move these guys out of the way first, but now what I'm going to need to do is move these guys in this direction, but luckily I've left myself a little bit of room to do that, so we'll sort of see the positioning shortly, but that's what he's decided to do with the Super Dragon. Alright, in the middle here we have the Kerawegh, who has taken up position on the circle. It's going to take me some time to get to this point, so my opponent actually going into the lead by about 4 points, if I recall correctly, by the end of turn 3. Maybe not that many, because I do get the zone with the Hunter Cadre, so I think it becomes a 4-2 lead at the end of turn 3, if I recall correctly. The Ashen Dawn marching into the forest, I want to position them in such a way that if I get shot at now, then at least I can use Obscuring against the Drake. And if he moves anything onto the zone, the Knights of the Ashen Dawn should be able to charge through. Note that I think I've got one guy sticking out of the zone, out of the forest, onto that zone to pick up some points there. Although at this point in the game, the side zones are only worth 1 each. So he does move the Hold Warriors onto the zone to get the points, though, so that's quite important. He's got 4 stands there, and I can't remember whether we've started a new turn or not, but I do believe I think this is the end of turn 4 where he marches them on. So I think at the end of turn 4 it becomes. I'll have to think about this when we get to the next photo of the end of the turn. In the meantime, though, the Hunter Cadre pelting the Ironclad Drake with shots using Fiend Hunter, stripping off maybe 4 or 5 wounds off him, which is a great start. So there you have a bit of a zoomed out photo. He's bringing in his Fireforged with the Tempered Steelshaper in the distance. That's quite important because it's going to put the Steelshaper in range of the dragon, so it can use the power elemental potency. You can see he's stacked up 1 in the corner there because he's used some of them elsewhere. And then the Drake itself is going to take advantage of tempered plate, so it can get hardened from the character. And of course, the guns backing up the dragon is going to be useful as well, because the dragon's going to take a while to die. So these guys will get a lot of free shooting off into the combat while that happens, which is a really strong play. So I've decided now to triple march using double time with the Gilded Legion Regiment onto the zone. This is important. It starts picking me up points here. And it's going to mean that if he charges me, I'm going to be very well positioned to block that charge due to Pike Formation and Armor of Dominion, and the large size of my regiment helps me to get around his terrifying. And then when I attack back, I'm going to have a lot of attacks at Clash 4, Cleave 1, and I'm still going to continue to have this Hunter Cadre unit shooting the Drake. So this play really helps to mitigate the power of the Drake, and if I can actually win this zone a late game, that's going to be really, really important. Alright, we have the other unit Fireforged appearing through the middle. He's left himself a bit of a gap there between the Drake and the Initiates. These guys are going to be a very important unit to start blasting whatever takes on the Initiates, most likely to be the Crimson Tower Knights, so this unit to be a very, very useful range unit in that sort of situation. So speaking of Crimson Tower Knights, we have the big boys, the Lance Bus, moving in behind the Steel Legion, and they've marched far enough forward that I will be able to hit the Initiates with a 2+ on the charge. So that's about as good as you can get from this angle. What will happen is that the Steel Legion move out of the way, and these guys can then march and then charge and hopefully connect. And given Olefant's Roar and Brutal 2, we should be expecting a lot of wounds onto the Initiates. So that's why I've positioned them there. It might give me a chance to score in the middle. That'll be really helpful. I figured I could go to the left and try and kill the Sorcerer, but I think it might just take me too long to do that. And on the right, I feel like I've got things well under control with the Gilded Legion against the Drake, so this seemed like the most logical choice. Alright, so just let me think about this. This is turn number 5. So at the end of 4 turns, my opponent scored from the middle zone a couple of times. So he would have got, he would have scored from the middle zone 3 times in a row. So that would give him 6 points. And I've scored from the side zones maybe twice or 3 times. Either way, I remember him being ahead by 2 or 3 points about this point in time. So we've got the Ashen Dawn going first because they are going to need to obliterate the Hold Warriors. And then we've got the Hunter Cadre there to shoot at the Drake. I'm going with the Gilded Legion last because it's actually better if he charges me rather than the other way around, because if he charges me, he loses Inspired and he loses impact hits. But if I charge him, he can actually naturally inspire, and that becomes painful. It would be nice to have Bastion, but the thing is, from that position, I'm actually gonna rewind so I can show you. From this position, if I charge his Drake, the Fireforged are all gonna obliterate me at effective range, which I don't want. So that's why the Gilded Legion are actually gonna go last and just let the Drake attack me. Where is the right card? Okay, so they're gonna go first, and of course Crimson Tower, Gilded Legion go last for the reason I mentioned. So I'm going first here. The Ashen Dawn are charging directly into the Hold Warriors. Note that they are going through a forest, so they lose impact hits and they lose Inspired. Because I wasn't really expecting to take a charge from the Hellbringer Drake, he's most likely to shoot me, not charge me. I decided to use Blessed on the attacks because they are just needing 4s otherwise. And it's a good thing I made that decision because I rolled so many 5s and 6s on the first attempt that Blessed really was clutch in bringing them back to like 14 hits out of 16 or whatever they needed. So I ended up doing just enough wounds and failed resolve checks to obliterate this unit. The whole Rag attacks back and does a number of wounds on the Knights, but we have eliminated his scoring unit there. His Drake will have to do the rest of the work. Now, my opponent, looking at the scenario, didn't really reason it the same way that I did and felt like his Drake needed the charge. I felt like it didn't, but he wanted to go for it. So he charges in here, and predictably, the impact hits did very little, and the clash action also did very little, partly because he was unlucky with Relentless Blows. Like, the Drake gets additional hits on any roll of a 1, and it's got like 12 attacks or something. So he was kind of hoping for that, but without Inspired and without rolling any 1s, he just didn't really do much damage to this unit overall. So that's sort of what we wanted, right? Which, of course, puts this regiment into effective range, so things working out really well for 100 Kingdoms right now. These guys absolutely peppering the Drake at close range with the rerolls and armor piercing 1, and of course he doesn't have a spell to harden the Drake at this point. Then comes the Steelshaper's regiment. They move forward a little bit further. We decided to play it that what he can do here is he can actually target this particular stand here of the Gilded Legion with 3 of his stands, and then the other one can target the other stand here. So we let him shoot with everything, and as you can imagine, at armor piercing 2, and given that the Gilded Legion do not have Bastion at this point, the shooting did way more damage than the Drake did. So that was a bit of a problem. Meanwhile, we've got the Mercenary Crossbowmen who were previously facing the other way. They are now going to pivot around, doing a reform to face the Drake. They are all in the forest, so they can see through the forest without penalty. The Drake is just sitting there. He's size 3, so we can shoot over the halberds, and this is able to score a couple of additional wounds on him, which is important. We want to kill him as soon as we can. Meanwhile, the Steelshaper is able to cast some sort of spell. It's a little bit too late in the day to do much more, but he does put Hardened onto the Drake. This does actually help because I still haven't activated the Gilded Legion, so when they do eventually activate and try and like pike him down, he'll at least be defense 3 against that, thanks to the Steelshaper's action there, and of course that will generate a token of elemental potency. Through the middle, a few more crossbow bolts going up against the initiates, but against defense 4, not a great deal of work done. The dragon, now as you can expect, just moving a little bit further forward. We measured it. At the point that he started, he did not have enough movement to touch the zone. So what he's doing here is he's just moving from a bit further back there. He moved forwards just to a point where the distance between that and that point would be less than 7, so that next turn he can move and shoot if he needs to. But of course, as you can imagine, the shooting here and of course the sorcerer's spell doing enough damage to knock these guys down to like 2 stands left. What he ideally wants to do is take them down to 1 stand so they're broken and can't charge. Over here we have the Fireforged, the very turquoise Fireforged, I must point out, over to the left there, shooting at the crossbows, although the crossbows are in the forest, and due to the reduced barrage, I only take a couple of wounds against that volley. Now, quite a pivotal play here. We've got the Steel Legion, and what I was originally thinking of doing is just moving them around there and just putting them in a line like that and have them face that way. Reason being that if they get charged by the Steelforged, the Steelforged will lose impact hits, so it'll really come down to who wins the roll. But the thing is, if he does make that charge, these knights here can actually obliterate that unit first and then deal with the initiates, which is really better. So I was thinking that would probably be the right play. The reason why I've moved them around here instead is firstly because it's going to take the Drake another turn to kill the Ashen Dawn, and I might get the opportunity to move off the zone with the Ashen Dawn and just block them for a bit, allowing these guys to start scoring the side zone, which, mind you, is going to be worth double points for the next couple of turns. So by doing that, although I will lose the Steel Legion against the Drake in the long run, that could net me 4 points and prevent him from getting 4 points, which is actually a huge swing. And it also gets these guys out of charge distance of the Crimson Tower Knights, just in case something goes horrifically wrong and I roll a double one and I accidentally sort of charge my own unit and break them both and it turns into a catastrophe. So to completely avoid that and to potentially score over here, I'm going to sacrifice this unit into the Drake. Is that the right play? Overall, I actually think no. If I was to go back in time and play this again, I would just keep the Steel Legion here and just go for the middle, because the Drake is really in a great position to kill anything that's going to go into the zone, and I do need some extra output against these guys here because they're just so tough. So that is the thinking there, but that's the way it played out. We also have the Mage just moving incrementally further forward to get a little bit more action onto the initiates. We're going to soften them up a bit with a bit more Kiss Farewell shooting from the crossbow that belongs to the Mage, as well as her fireballs. Opponent deciding to stay on the zone, but also staying as far away from the Crimson Tower Knights without leaving the zone. So he's just forcing me to roll that 2+. And the column is being formed here where the size of the unit is contracting from 3 wide to 2 wide. This is important because it gives plenty of space to the Steelforged and the Fireforged, which are going to be both instrumental and helpful against the Crimson Towers once they come in there, because the Fireforged are just going to gun them down with AP2, and the Steelforged are also going to do very well in the fighting after the charge has happened, locking them in place. So this is quite a good formation to hold there from the Kerawegh. All the little shooting and the fireballs that I'm doing, by the way, a lot of it's being negated by Flaming Oratory for Tenacious, which is just such a good ability for initiates. The last game we played, he was kind of forgetting to use it, but this game, every single time, we both remembered to apply it, which always feels good. So the Mage, you can see her trying to just get the fireballs in, but again, not doing a lot of damage against initiates for that reason I mentioned, and also because of spell interference. So we also have the Steelforged just not moving too far forward. We had to talk about it, and I explained to him that if he just rushes all the way through the forest, I could charge that unit with the Knights instead of the Initiates. And the problem for him there is that the Steelforged are going to be affected by Terrifying. They're not going to have the size bonus to give them more resolve, and they probably would take a lot of damage to the Knights, and it puts them into a situation where in the next turn the Knights might just be able to charge again into the Initiates, and he would have lost a critical unit. So having them there in the forest is really good defense against the charge of the Knights. He could potentially have moved through the forest and charged the Steel Legion in the flank, but again, that just gives me a perfect position to just mow them down with the Crimson Towers. So this is probably the best play he could have made, in my opinion. So to end this turn, we do move and we do roll that 2+ with the reroll, I might add, and we go into the Initiates here. I was really hoping for a powerful roll here, given that you've got effectively 20 rolls on a 4 or less with Brutal 2 and Terrifying 1, plus another 4 rolls on a 5 or less with Brutal 2, Terrifying 1. But you are up against Initiates who are a Defense 4 base. They come down to 2s, and he's got very, very good Resolve, and he's got Tenacious as well. So I came in and I did a little bit of damage, and then my opponent used some Elemental Power tokens, and then he read the rules again and realized, actually, the Kerawegh can't use the tokens. It's got to be within 8 inches of one of the sorcerers or the Tempered Steelshaper. So I did actually strip away more than 2 stands there. Did maybe 2.5 stands worth of damage, but it wasn't quite the impactful blow I was hoping for. It just goes to show you that even a powerful regiment like this can't obliterate absolutely everything. There's going to be something in your opponent's army that just can't quite be stamped out by this charge. And now after you've made the charge, you're in a little bit more trouble with the Crimson Tower, because they're in range of a lot of stuff that can kill them. So there it is. We've got the Priory Commander in there. He's not really going to be dueling that guy, even though he's got eccentric fighting style and has to reroll his own armor saves. We're not going to be seeing too many duels, and we're going to be hoping for a few more clashes here, because the Crimson Towers still poke a fair bit of damage in close combat, especially due to the Priory Commander and thanks to Terrifying. Over here, we finally have the clash action from the Gilded Legion, stabbing the Drake, but not doing too much damage. But after this round of combat, we are within range of killing him. He's very close to dying. Mind you, with the Tempered Steelshaper coming in behind him, he'll have access to the Elemental Potency tokens. So that is the end of turn number 5. And at this point, because I'm holding the left-hand zone with my little Ashen Dawn guy, who I believe was able to rally. No, actually, I don't think I've got that guy. I think he is broken. These guys, of course, though, they have like 6 stands on the zone, so they are scoring for sure there. And over here, we've got 5 stands of Gilded Legion plus 1 stand of Hunter Cadre against 1 Drake. So that does net me like 3 points, I think. So it puts me ahead of my opponent just barely in this end of turn 5 situation. And that is the overview of the battlefield going forward. So, turn 6. We're going to start with the Order of the Ashen Dawn, because what he can do is he can rally and charge the Drake, or rally and march in such a way that he actually leaves the zone or gets to the edge of it and prevents the Drake from walking onto the zone, allowing the Steel Legion to move onto that zone, netting me 2 points. So I've got to stay in the lead that way, and even though the Drake's going to get me in the long run, it does buy me time and builds that points buffer. Next, I've got the Gilded Legion just to put up Bastion to maybe kill the Drake if I'm lucky, and then the Crimson Tower Knights to hopefully get some damage before the Fireforged completely mow them down. Steel Legion going last because I don't want them to move into range of the Sorcerer, only for them to get obliterated by a Fireball, right? So, over here we have the Crimson Tower Knight who's trying to get some work done. He decides just to rally and move, so nothing much accomplished there. We have the fight here between the Drake and the Gilded Legion. Unfortunately, the Drake's going first here and actually is mauling me to bits. This time he rolls really well. He has inspired. He has got his relentless blows, like he rolled like 5 ones. So I took an absolute brutal pounding here without Bastion. I do remove Cleave, but he does have a terrifying 2. So I'm reduced to like 6 wounds remaining on these stands here, plus the character. So that is incredibly painful. Over here, the Crimson Tower Knights are whacking away at the Initiates, breaking them, reducing them down to like 4 wounds left. So hopefully the shooting and the fireballs can finish that regiment off. Over here we have the Steelshaper, able to get a range. Obviously, you can see the 662 here on the Drake. That represents 14 wounds inflicted. If we go over to this here, what's his stats like? Let's find it. So he's got 17. That means he's got like 3 wounds left, but he can start healing him. So we've got the range. We've got the Steelshaper moving within range to use elemental potency and to perhaps shoot at the Hunter Cadre, etc. Speaking of Hunter Cadre, we've got another volley going off against the Drake. Can't remember if they killed it, but I don't think they did manage to. No, actually, I think this is the last stand of the Drake. This is where they finally finish him off. We'll check the future photos to see if that was the case. And here, this is a clutch moment in the game. So, because this character here is about to be removed, given that he's only got 1 stand left in the regiment he's in, and I've still got crossbows and the Mage with Kiss Farewell and the Fireball to unleash on that 1 stand, his last gasp here is to cast a spell on me, which will stop me from scoring, which is huge. So let's have a look at it. It is called Fear. It's attunement 3. Target enemy regiment cannot seize objective zones until the end of the round. But because it says scaling in brackets, and because my Mage is within range of interference on the Crimson Tower Knights, he actually needs to roll 3 successes on 2s, which he does not manage to get because it's quite a difficult roll to make. And the spell does not go off. It doesn't give him elemental potency. The Knights continue scoring, which is a clutch moment. So over here, we have the about turn of the crossbows turning around to shoot at the Initiates. I know we've got a bit of a blurry photo, but they're all sort of firing into that stand there. This does tell me that the Ironclad Drake has been destroyed at this point, so we are now going to shoot at the Initiates and do a bit more damage to them, although to volley 2. Not expecting too much damage. This is where the Steelforged come in. They are going through the forest. They lose impact hits. They lose inspired, but they are clash 5. So with the 9 attacks in base contact plus the 1 support attack, it's 10 attacks with cleave 1. This does absolutely clobber the Crimson Tower Knights, as you'd expect. Well, it doesn't quite clobber them. That doesn't really happen until the Fireforged unleash their cannons, but it is painful. Over here, we've got a double march from the crossbows in the center. What they're going to need to do is they're going to need to get these Steelforged in a bit of a closer range, and if they move onto the hill there, they're going to be able to sort of fire through that gap, and not all Steelforged are in the forest there, so this might be a way to get a little bit of armor piercing onto that regiment, because the Crimson Tower Knights are not going to survive forever. So this is where the men-at-arms move up. They're able to use the shooting from the Mage to attack this initiate unit there, and then the Mage herself can use the fireball. So between those two things, I believe that is the situation where we managed to remove the initiates. But then, of course, we have the horrible Fireforged absolutely blasting the Crimson Tower Knights, reducing them to armor 2, which does absolutely mash a bunch of those stands left, putting me in a situation where next turn I'm likely to lose the entire regiment. Okay, so lastly we have the Fireforged on the other side here. They are able to shoot at the, I think they have already shot at the Gilded Legion, reducing them to like 3 wounds left at this point, but moving closer to the zone as well. So we've got the Imperial officer, who is like one of the last cards to activate. Luckily for him, he is able to rally the regiment, which is clutch because it allows me to have that scoring going on. Note that the Hunter Cadre could have done it themselves because they've got a corner of their base touching the zone anyway. So I think we're on turn 6, or is it 7? We're going to go with the Steel Legion first, because if I just show you the zoom out of the table, the Steel Legion have moved onto that zone to pick up some points there. The side zones are worth more points at this stage of the game. So if I win the roll, I could potentially go after the Drake there if I get a lucky roll and do a lot of wounds to it, and also prevent it from moving onto the zone at all. So that's why they are going to be going first. After that, the Crimson Tower Knights hopefully getting more damage onto the Steelforged before they are removed. Then the Gilded Legion possibly to block the Fireforged from getting onto the zone, as you can see on the right hand side there, or even just moving backwards into the forest. So that's the thinking, and then everything else can follow on after that. So first thing that happens is actually the Hellbringer Drake moving on to the objective and just shooting at the Steelforged. Not the Steelforged, the Steel Legion. After he made this play, I just told him to move the model a little bit around, otherwise I'd charge his flank, which he doesn't really want. So the end position looks like that. So what happens is that he moves it in, he shoots at the Steel Legion, who lose a stand and take an additional wound, so 5 wounds total. Then they charge him back, do a bunch of wounds to him. But what will happen after this is that the Sorcerer will blast them with a fireball and eventually win. And of course the Drake is worth 3 stands, though only 2 stands, so he'll start scoring regardless at this point. So well done to the opponent there. So that is them, and the Sorcerer blasting them with a fireball, and they are not going to live much longer. Over here, we do have an opportunity to activate the character and the Crimson Tower Knights, bashing the Steel Forged again, doing maybe a stand's worth of damage, or not even that really, because they pass a lot of armor saves. So over here we've got the Gilded Legion putting up Bastion and moving into the forest. This is quite crucial because it will allow them to continue scoring, and if the Fireforged move up and shoot them, they'll be firing at half burst. I'll be saving on 2s, and if he's not rolling well, I could actually survive with this unit. Over here, we also have the Hunter Cadre shooting back at the Fireforged, doing a little bit of damage, but, not that much. They are moving to the left a little bit, so we've got 2 stands on the zone rather than 1, which is important because I want to be able to contest him if he decides to just double march straight onto the zone. Over here, we have the Fireforged blasting the Crimson Towers and absolutely murdering them, so they do not stick around for much longer. And my opponent deciding not to double march onto the zone, so he'll give me another 2 points here, which is clutch. And rather than shooting into the forest, he decides to go after the Hunter Cadre, which does do a bunch of damage to them, but doesn't wipe them out, and it leaves me with 2 regiments to play with here, which is also kind of important. Now that the Crimson Tower Knights have been completely routed, we've got the Mercenary Crossbowmen, which previously had double march. Now they've moved into a better position so they can reap the rewards. by shooting into combat with the Steelforged, who there are actually 3 stands there. They've actually combat reformed, by the way, so you got the front 2 stands there, and then there's actually a back stand. I know that you can't see it very clearly from the photo, but that's how the regiment is formed. But they do a bit of damage. The Mage able to move up here and fire at them as well, so possibly stripping 1 stand of Steelforged from the back there. She does need to be a bit cautious of the Fireforged as well, though, because the men-at-arms will get absolutely clobbered in a ranged firefight there. Also launching another fireball at the Steelforged, taking them down to just 2 stands in the end. The other unit of Mercenary Crossbowmen, which we have, we jokingly describe them as being pivotal this game, not because the result of the game is pivoting around them, but because they have been reforming and shooting for 4 turns in a row now. But they do so once again, and they get into a shot range of the Fireforged in the distance, stripping maybe 1 or 2 wounds, but nothing major to report there. So this is the end of that turn. I believe this is the end of turn 6 or turn 7. Can't quite remember what we got to, but let's break it down. So my opponent is about to obliterate these guys and start scoring 2 points for the rest of the game until turns 9 and 10, where it's like 1 point per turn at the end there. In the middle, we've got a absolutely clutch situation where these guys are probably going to charge in here and obliterate these guys and score this zone. But I do have the Mage and the men-at-arms to potentially counterattack them and score. But if this unit here completely wipes out this unit, then it's pretty much game there, because he can score with either this unit or this unit, and this is the only unit I can score the middle zone with, and that middle zone is going to swing back to being important in turns 9 and 10. On the right-hand side, he's got this really good unit here of Fireforged and the character, which, realistically is enough to kill everything I have on that zone. So I do feel like I'm actually losing at this point. Very, very close game. So with that in mind, we're going to go with the Gilded Legion first, and my clever plan there is to potentially block his Tempered Steelshaper from getting onto the zone for yet another turn, buying me even more time to continue scoring with the Hunter Cadre. Then it's just going to be a matter of hopefully getting a shot off with the Mercenary Crossbowmen before they get obliterated by the Steelforged unit. So here's another overview shot before we get into the action, and it is going to be me going first. So the plan works, and what happens here is that the Gilded Legion do a march charge into combat with the Steelforged unit. They literally only have 3 wounds left on the board there, but they've march charged, and that's going to put me in a position where the opponent can't shoot and can't get on the zone either, unless he somehow kills me without inspiring and just walks forward. So over here we also have the crossbows just firing at the Steelforged unit, but not really getting much more damage done. And then of course these guys come barreling into me and absolutely obliterate the crossbows. Even though they've only got 2 stands there, that's 9 attacks, and they're all on Clash 5, so I just get completely creamed and they're removed. So the Sorcerer, seeing this, moves the entire regiment onto the zone. Note that he is seizing with 1 stand, and I'm seizing with 1 stand. But the thing is, if I shoot him, he's actually taken damage with this unit already, this 1 stand here. So if I remove that, he'll come off the zone. So if I can get enough shooting and spells onto that 1 guy, that's going to be clutch. Over here, we have a talk about the maths, and I explained to my opponent that if he decides to use Hone Blades, which gives him +1 clash, which he does for free automatically, and if he attacks me without inspiring, he's going to have 10 attacks from the regiment, because they've got 3 attacks each, and they have a leader. So that's going to go up to Clash 3 at attack 3 plus leader, so it's 10 attacks on Clash 3, and then you've got the Steelshaper himself, who has got another 4 attacks, effectively Clash 3 because of Hone Blades. So you're rolling 14 dice, and you're expecting to get 7 hits, and I'm going to be, defense 4? So if I fail, 2 or 3, well, if I fail 3, I'm dead. If I fail 2 and then fail a resolve check, I'm dead. So it's pretty close, but my opponent also pointed out to me that he's kind of behind on points at the stage, and if he doesn't make this play, if he doesn't take this risk, then he's probably locking himself out of the game. So he does make the roll, and he does succeed, and he does actually kill the Gilded Legion, thanks to reasonably good dice that don't go wrong, and then he moves on to the zone, which is critical. So over here, the Mage is now shooting at the Steelforged, or at least using her spell to actually remove one of the stands of Steelforged, which is pretty clutch. Over here, we have the Fireforged shooting at me, and this is the one roll that I was really dreading. If he absolutely obliterates the men-at-arms by like clearing out half their stands, breaking them, putting me in a position to lose them next turn, then the game is won. But thankfully, the rolls were subpar here from the Fireforged, and I didn't actually lose that much stuff. And I survived with the unit not broken, allowing me to score again, which is critical. Over here, the Steel Legion, of course, are obliterated by the Drake. And what I've done here is with my Hunter Cadre, I've decided to march charge into the Fireforged here. I can't remember the sequence play actually. So a couple of moments ago, I said to you that the best strategy for him staying in the game was to clash me without inspiring using honed blades. I think that what I meant was that was what he was going to do the following turn when he's up against the Hunter Cadre. So I completely got that wrong in my head. Excuse me, I've kind of misreported things. So what happened in the previous combat is that he did use Inspire and he did use Honed Blades to attack me on 4s. And I think the reason why he needed to do that is because he's up against Bastion. So in the following turn, when he activates these guys again, he does need to attack me without inspiring to move on to the zone, because I'm able to score at the end of this turn because of the play made here by the Hunter Cadre. Alright, so we're up to speed now. We then have the crossbows shooting again at the Fireforged in the distance, and we come to a new turn where I really have to get something happening with the Mage. She has to get something done on the Steelforged, otherwise I could really lose my unit, or at least get her to kill the remaining Fireforged. She is the most important thing to activate. This is what the battlefield looks like before we make the initiative roll. So this Mage is going to score for the rest of the game here, possibly even moving over to here to attack the center. If he activates this unit first, he could do a lot of damage here. I've already taken 3 wounds onto one stand there, so if he does 5 wounds worth of damage, he will strip the last 2 there and break me. I can rally though, that's quite important. If he does wipe this unit out and move this unit onto the zone, I've lost the game. He is probably about to kill the Hunter Cadre and move onto the zone with that unit there, and he's not too far behind on points either. So what happens here is that he does make the play that we were previously talking about, which is to put Honed Blades down with the Steelshaper, clash normally without inspiring. He does kill the Hunter Cadre just barely, and then he moves on to the zone. So the play that I was previously talking about, which I thought that he made against the Gilded Legion in my head, that wasn't really the case. He just inspired clashed on that turn, and then this turn is when he attacks normally without inspiring and kills the Hunter Cadre anyway, moves on to the zone, and starts scoring here in the long run. So what I can do here is I can move the Mage, attacking the Fireforged with obviously the Fire Dart and the Kiss Farewell, and stripping off a stand there, which is critical because I need to reduce the amount of damage you can do with the Fireforged, and also turning around here with the Reform or the wheels so that I've got 2 stands touching the objective zone just in case. The Fireforged shooting back at me, they do have a lot of guns, but unfortunately, again, for my opponent, rolling a bit poorly and not really getting the damage he was looking for against the men-at-arms. We even have the, as you can see, this distance, he hasn't quite removed that second stand. And as we can see here, we've got the Mercenary Crossbowmen also shooting back at the Fireforged, softening them up a bit further to hopefully destroy them by the end of the game. Then he has this play where the dragon moves all the way to the edge of the zone, and what we can do is go to the final play. But before we get there, let's just talk about the position we're in. At this point, I'm 3 points ahead. So in the final phase of the game, if he stays here and scores that zone and scores this zone and I score that zone, then we're even and I'll stay 3 points ahead. If he scores this zone over here, so if he gets 1 point from that with the Fireforged, let me just grab the pen again. So 1 point there. If he kills that unit, thanks to this regiment here and the Mage, and he runs the Drake onto that zone, which is possible, and gets 2, then that is a drawn game, because he's only 3 points behind. So I explained all that to my opponent. I said, what you can do here is you can run the Drake in there if you win the roll. But if I win the roll, the Sorcerer can move around and get in the way. So what actually ended up happening there is that I did win the roll. So let's just find the position here. So of course I have to have the Mage activating first to like blast the Fireforged with a fireball and then move the Men-at-Arms in the way, which is exactly what happens. So the Mage is now moved in to block the Dragon from moving in and has obliterated the last Fireforged out of the distance. But what can happen here is that the fireball can go over here because the Drake's size 3. It can see over the hill. So you got the fireball first. If he rolls well, this unit is completely obliterated, and there's enough speed for the Drake to run over to the zone, allowing him to tie the game. So what we did is we rolled the fireball. It came up really well. It did like 5 hits to me. It absolutely murdered the Men-at-Arms, and then the Drake runs over there. So we decided to call it a draw. To be like technically, factually accurate here, my opponent actually mispositioned the Drake and wasn't actually able to see me with the fireball, so legally couldn't have done that. And when I said to him, well, you could have just put the Drake somewhere else, he said to me, well, I probably wouldn't have had enough movement to get there because I would have had to wheel. And then when he actually had a stack of cards put together, he didn't actually have the Mage Sorcerer going first. I actually had to explain to him after that what he needed to have done. So we kind of rolled a couple of things back to turn it into a draw. So technically speaking, from a tournament perspective, I probably would have won here, but I wanted to play it as a draw. I just wanted to play out sort of what would have happened if everything had been done perfectly optimally, and with that play being made, we can call it a draw in that particular way, which I'm totally happy to do, because that was an absolute banger of a game. That was just it was just honestly a really fun one, a really good one. Very close game right to the end. There was a point where I really felt like Dweghom were winning around about turn 7 or 8, because they had everything in position to sort of take over, and there were a lot of clutch rolls which went back and forward. I had some extremely good rolls and some extremely bad rolls, but probably the lion's share of the important clutch ones. But that's what wargaming is about, and I especially like the long games because you can find a lot more smaller decisions that could have really helped you. The only thing that I feel like I really would have done differently that game possibly would have been the movement with the Steel Legion. Had they been in a position to support the Crimson Tower Knights against the Steelforged and have that solid position in the middle where I pretty much had the entire mid-game locked up, I think that would have been beneficial. Even though he would have scored earlier on that zone with the Sorcerer, I would have had more time to get ahead and score in the middle, I feel. Maybe not, though. I mean, they did a fine job in delaying the Drake a couple of turns, so there was that as well. But yeah, Happy New Year, guys. Hope you enjoyed this bat rep, and we'll see you in the next one.